Nestled in the serene woods of Northern California, the small resort town of Keady was meant to be a quiet escape, a place where families could breathe in peace, not terror. But on the morning of April 12th, 1981, that peace was shattered forever. What began as an ordinary evening at Cabin 28 would end in a brutal quadruple homicide, missing child, and a mystery that remains unsolved more than 40 years later. This is the haunting story of the Keady Cabin murders, one of the most disturbing and baffling cold cases in American history. In July 1979, Glenna Sue Sharp was a single mother of 5 trying to build a better life for her children. She had recently moved from Connecticut to Northern California after separating from her husband, James Sharp. Upon arriving in California, she rented a small trailer formerly occupied by her brother at the Claremont Trailer Village in Quincy. The following fall, she moved to house number 28 in the rural Sierra Nevada Railroad town of Keady. The house was much larger than the trailer and had become available when Plumas County Sheriff Sylvester Douglas Thomas vacated the property. Sue lived there with their 15-year-old son John, daughters Sheila, 14 years old, and Tina, 12 years old, and 2 younger sons, Rick, 10 years old, and Greg, 5 years old. Though life wasn't easy, Sue worked hard and kept close ties with neighbors. Her children had friends, and the Sharp family was trying to make the best of their new beginning. April 11, 1981 started like any other day. At around 11:30 a.m., Sue, Sheila, and Greg drove from the residence of their friends, the Meeks family, to retrieve Rick, who was attending baseball tryouts at Gangster Field in Quincy. They happened upon John and his friend Dana Hall Waygate hitchhiking at the mouth of the canyon from Quincy to Keady, and then drove them about 6 miles, 9.7 kilometers, away from Keady. 2 hours later, at around 3:38 p.m., John and Dana hitchhiked back to Quincy, where they may have had plans to visit friends. Around this time, the boys were seen in the city's downtown area. That same evening, Sheila had plans to spend the night with the Siebel family, who lived in adjacent number 27, while Sue remained at home with Rick, Greg, and the boys' young friend Justin Smart. Sheila departed number 28 shortly after 8 p.m. to sleep at the Siebel's. Tina, who had been watching television at the Siebel residence, returned to 28 after asking what time it was. It was 9:30. What happened next remains one of the most gruesome unsolved crimes in American history. The next morning, Sheila walked into a nightmare. At approximately 10 a.m. on April 12th, Sheila returned to 28 and discovered the dead body of Sue, John, and Dana in the house's living room. All 3 had been bound with medical tape and electrical cords. Tina was absent from the house, while the 3 younger children, Rick, Greg, and Justin, were found physically unharmed in the adjacent bedroom. Upon discovering the scene, Sheila rushed back to the Siebel's house, and Jamie Siebel retrieved Rick, Greg, and Justin through the bedroom window. He later admitted to having it briefly enter the home through the back door to see if anyone was still alive, potentially contaminating evidence in the process. The murders of Sue, John, and Dana were especially vicious. 2 bloody knives and 1 hammer were found at the scene. Blood spatter evidence from inside the house indicated that the murders had all taken place in the living room. Sue was discovered lying on her side near the living room sofa, nude from the waist down and gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear, which had been secured with tape. She had been stabbed in the chest, and her throat was stabbed horizontally, the wound passing through her larynx and nicking her spine, and on the side of her head was an imprint matching the butt of a Daisy 880 Powerline BB pellet rifle. John's throat was slashed. Dana had multiple head injuries and had been manually strangled to death. John and Dana suffered blunt force trauma to the heads caused by 1 or more hammers. Autopsies determined that Sue and John died from the knife wounds and blunt force trauma. 2 bloody knives and a hammer were recovered, but the sheer brutality of the scene suggested the use of multiple weapons, and possibly multiple killers. Oddly, the home showed no signs of forced entry. The phone was off the hook, lights were off, curtains drawn. Whoever had done this either knew the layout or had taken their time. It wasn't until much later that police realized 12-year-old Tina Sharp was missing. For years, her fate remained a mystery until April 11, 1984. A bottle collector discovered the cranium portion of a human skull and part of a mandible at Camp 18 near Feather Falls in neighboring Butte County, roughly 5 miles, 8.0 kilometers from Feather Falls, California. The remains were confirmed by a forensic pathologist. To be those of Tina in June 1984. Alongside her bones were a child's blanket, a blue nylon jacket, a pair of jeans missing the back pocket, and an empty surgical tape dispenser, chilling artifacts from a stolen life. Shortly after announcing the discovery, the Butte County Sheriff's Office received an anonymous call that identified the remains as belonging to Tina, but the call was not documented. A tape containing a recording of the call was found at the bottom of an evidence box at some point after 2013 by a deputy who was assigned to the case. The initial investigation was filled with errors and missed opportunities. The sheriff at the time of the murders, Doug Thomas, and his deputy, Lieutenant Don Stoy, were not initially able to discern an apparent motive. The murders at Katy Cabin 28 appeared to be random acts of cruelty. The strangest thing is that there is no apparent motive. Any case without an apparent motive is the toughest to solve. Story recalled to the Sacramento Bee in 1987. Sheila and the Siebel family, with whom Sheila had spent the night in the neighborhood home, heard no commotion during the night. A couple living in nearby house 16 was awakened at 1:15 a.m. by what sounded like muffled screaming. Unable to discern from where they were coming, they went back to bed. However, though the 3 boys initially claimed to have slept through the massacre, Ricky and Greg's friend Justin Smart did later say that he saw Sue with 2 men in the house that night. One reportedly had a mustache and long hair, and the other one was clean-shaven, with short hair, but both in glasses. One of the men had a hammer. Justin reported then that John and Dana entered the home and argued with the men, which resulted in a violent fight. Tina was then allegedly taken out of the cabin's back door by one of the men. Allegedly, a lot of potential evidence was collected at the scene, but because this was pre-DNA testing, very little helpful information was found at the time. Sheriff Thomas called the Sacramento Department of Justice, which then sent in 2 special agents from the organized crime unit, not homicide, which struck many as odd. 2 men immediately came under suspicion. Martin Smart, the father of Justin, the boy who was in the cabin, and John Booty, Martin's house guest with ties to organized crime. Martin had reported his hammer missing, a hammer that matched the murder weapon. Original composite sketches of 2 suspects based on testimony from Justin claimed to have witnessed the crimes. Justin offered conflicting stories of the evening and stated that he had dreamed details of the murder. In his later account of events, told under hypnosis, he claimed to have seen Sue with 2 men. Based on Justin's description, composite sketches of 2 unknown men were produced by Harlan Embry, a man with no artistic ability and no training in forensic sketching. It was never explained why. With access to the Justice Departments and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, top forensics artists, law enforcement chose to use an amateur who sometimes volunteered to help police. In press releases accompanying the sketches, the suspects were described as in their late 20s to early 30s. One stood between 5'11" to 6'2", with dark blonde hair, and the other between 5'6" and 5'10", with black greased hair. Both wore gold-framed sunglasses. Rumors regarding the crime began. Ritualistic or motivated by drug trafficking were dismissed by Plumas County Sheriff Doug Thomas, who stated in the week following the murders that neither drug paraphernalia or illegal drugs were found in the home. And then there was the letter. In 2016, investigators uncovered a letter Martin had sent to his wife, Marilyn. Quote, "I paid the price for your love. I bought it with 4 people's lives." End quote. In a 2016 interview, Gemberg stated that the letter was quote-unquote overlooked in the initial investigation. It was never admitted as evidence. He later criticized the quality of the initial investigation, saying, quote, "You could have taken someone just coming out of the academy and they'd have done a better job," end quote. A counselor whom Smart regularly visited also alleged that he had admitted to the murders of Sue and Tina but claimed, quote, "I didn't have anything to do with the boys," end quote. He allegedly told the counselor that Tina was killed to prevent her from identifying him, as she had, quote-unquote, witnessed the whole thing. And yet, despite this, no charges were ever brought against either man. On March 24, 2016, A hammer matched the description of one Smart had claimed to have lost was discovered in a local pond, taken into evidence by Plumas County Special Investigator Mike Gamberg. Plumas County Sheriff Greg Hagwood, who was 16 years old at the time of the murders and knew the Sharp family, stated, quote, "The location it was found, it would have been intentionally put there. It would have not been accidentally misplaced," end quote. Gamberg also stated that at the time, 6 potential suspects were being examined. In April 2018, Gamberg stated that DNA evidence recovered from a piece of tape at the crime scene matched that of a known living suspect. Both Martin and Bo are now deceased. Some believe the murders were born out of jealousy, that Sue was helping Marilyn leave her abusive marriage. Others believe Martin and Bo were part of a wider drug smuggling operation protected by corrupt officials. Why else would 2 organized crime investigators, not homicide detectives, be assigned to the case? In 2013, the case was reopened. New DNA evidence found on the medical tape linked it to a known living suspect. A mysterious call from 1984, identifying Tina's remains before they were public knowledge, was found buried in a case file untouched for over 30 years. Today, detectives believe that there are still people alive who helped commit or covered up these murders. The Kitty Cabin murders devastated a family and shattered a small community. Cabin 28 was demolished in 2004, but the trauma lingers. Surviving family members, especially Sheila Sharp, had never stopped seeking answers. Detectives Mike Gamberg and Greg Hagwood remain dedicated to solving the case. They believe justice is still possible. 4 lives lost, a young girl abducted, a family torn apart, and a town left with unanswered questions. The Kitty Cabin murders are more than just an unsolved case. They're a haunted reminder of how justice delayed can become justice denied. But there is still hope, and sometimes all it takes is one person to come forward. If you have information about this case, please contact the Plumas County Sheriff's Office. If this story moved you, share it. Help keep these voices from fading into silence. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay compassionate, and as always, be safe out there.